I actually talked with 36 different other development shops or potential co-founders, and every single one of them actually told me that what I wanted to do wasn't possible to be done. It wasn't until I talked with John when he was like, let's try it.
Today we're talking to Craig Reffner from Abstrakt. Abstrakt is one of the early companies in the Biso Studio portfolio. We're really proud of what you've been able to accomplish so far in such a quick amount of time. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about what Abstrakt is and does, and then we can go into kind of a little bit of the story of how you got started and where you're at now. So to start, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and introduce Abstrakt?
Yeah. So, Craig, I'm super excited to be here. My name's Craig Reffner, founder, CEO of Abstrakt. I still have to kind of kick myself sometimes or pinch myself when I say things like that because it's been a wild ride the past couple of years. But ultimately, the genesis of Abstrakt started when I started my sales career about 8 years ago as a SDR, cold calling every single day. Had pretty miserable experiences in terms of how I was coached. And as I progressed and matured through, I don't know if matured is the right word, because I don't know if I've matured yet, but as I've grown in my sales career, had been a very early adopter and big fan of technology and how it could impact my success as a salesperson, but then also as a sales leader. And so call it fate, call it luck, but ultimately kind of came up with this idea of leveraging natural language processing and speech to text kind of by happenstance, kind of by using it on my phone every single day. And yeah, one thing led to another, and I was like, let's have this crazy idea to try to start a real-time call coaching software that uses NLP and speech to text to prompt reps with what to say in real time based upon the situation they find themselves in. And 2 years later, here we are with a couple hundred users on the product, some pretty awesome customers, and well on our way to growing this thing into something pretty cool.
When you first had that idea, did you realize how difficult that was going to be to pull off?
No, actually not. I thought it would actually be kind of easy. And what's crazy is I don't even know if John knows this, but I actually talked with 36 different other development shops or potential co-founders, and every single one of them actually told me that what I wanted to do wasn't possible to be done. And it wasn't until I talked with John when he was like, let's try it. And so there's a lot of people who didn't think Abstrakt could be built. And as we went through our proof of concept, seeing if we could even build it in the first place, we were faced with some pretty harsh realities about how difficult this was. And still to this day, it's not perfect. And if I've learned one thing, it's that the human language is complex to understand, even human to human. Add a layer of technology in there that's trying to understand human communication it's been fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's been interesting to watch. I mean, I just joined Biso Studio when you and John started working together, and he was like, check out this. I actually remember them having discussions about which technology format to use, whether to use a desktop application or a browser based thing. And I was listening going oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds kind of cool. And watching it progress over time. I mean, even honestly, to be fair, when he first demoed it to me, when he did the proof of concept, which you guys did a proof of concept first and then kind of just prove is this even possible? And then from there, build out what Abstrakt is today, kind of version 1. And I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that you still want to work on and create on top of that, which is true for every software company. But I remember seeing the proof of concept, and he was so proud of it. And I looked at it and I was like, what is this? I don't understand. This is not valuable at all. I don't, because I didn't get it. I didn't get the vision at all. Even though I did work in sales before, now I totally get it. So how did you feel whenever you first saw that proof of concept, were you like vindicated and you were like, yes, it will work? Or were you like, oh man, this is going to be so much harder to get this to something that's usable?
Um, so the first proof of concept we had was essentially like a back and forth conversation that was totally scripted where it was like, Craig, do you have an iPhone? And you had two choices. You could say yes or no. And then based upon what you said, it would tell me what to say. And it was slow, like it barely worked, but when it worked great. Um, when I first saw that, I was excited because I was like, cool, this is something that's possible. But then I was like, oh my God, like there's so much about what we don't know yet. I think was my biggest fear was we just scratched the surface of this and now we have to go like we made it work in a box and we then had to go figure out how to make it work outside that box. And that's kind of back to my earlier comment around um, we had to account for the fact that we weren't working with robots, we were working with humans, and humans don't operate the way we want them to work. And abstract still isn't perfect, but um, that was my biggest fear was this works in a box, how do we make it work not in the box?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your traction so far. You've been around for roughly 2 years, right? You just won a pitch competition in Atlanta, raised a nice round. You've got all these customers coming on board. How does it feel to finally kind of be getting some traction and being looking around and seeing kind of other startups that are at the same time stage as you? And how do you feel like you compare against the progress that they're making?
Yeah, so a couple of comments there. First off, I would say we launched, I think in April of 2021 was when we kind of got V1 of the product out there. And I'll tell you right now, like we had no business putting that product out into the market, let alone asking people to pay for it, which they did. I'm still not sure how that happened. Um, but ultimately, we put it out there. We got some folks to pay for it. And I think from about a May onward, we realized that we had a lot of work to do in the product before it would be something where we could roll it out to hundreds, thousands of people. And so I would say, like, when I think of like kind of looking back, we were in like a paid beta
Hmm.
for most of 2021. And I would say we really kind of came to market in like February of this year. And so from February of this year, we've gone from 30,000 in ARR to where we're going to end May at 125,000 in ARR. So we've, 4x'd in the past, 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, that's okay,
Um,
traction.
and I would, it doesn't suck, right? Um, and to the question around like, how do we compare? Something that I kind of always struggled with was like, how do we match up? Like, what from an investor standpoint, how are
Hmm.
they looking at us compared to maybe somebody else that's trying to, go and um, grab, $1 million or whatever that might be. I realized I got to stop doing that first off, because there's people that have grown way faster, but you know what? Like they developed a simple web application that is launched in your browser and was built with, not much of an ambition to try to change stuff. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
they went and picked up a bunch of traction, but um, anybody could have built that product. And so I look at our growth and trying to measure us against ourselves and what we want to do. And so we've set certain ARR benchmarks and thresholds for kind of gates that we want to hit. And we're generally plus or minus 10% of those gates that we want to hit. And as long as we continue to do that, we don't need to worry about measuring up against anybody else.
It's an interesting point. I mean, it is really hard to do. I mean, we obviously are doing that all the time, kind of trying to look at other startups and be like, well, how's what we're doing stacking up, both in like terms of how many startups that we work with fail and continue to go on, and It's difficult because it's like it's not one to one because some application might be way easier to build and it's all just a sales play or a marketing play. Not to say
Yep.
that that's not a viable and completely legitimate business model as well, but you know what we're really in business to do is build stuff that other people like happen to you go along and say, yeah, that's not possible. Because I think that's where the real opportunity is, and it's not like you're playing in a space that's not established. I think sometimes people fall into the mistake of thinking being a first mover in a space is a good idea. And it's like, how many billion-dollar companies are the first mover in their space? They innovated on momentum in a space, but usually they weren't the first one to create a market. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how you're playing in a space that is definitely established and has some momentum, but you're trying to do things. How are you trying to do things differently, and how are you thinking about innovating in that space?
I think so. When I think of like our competition, and this is both from like a prospect customer as well as an investor standpoint, the space we're playing in is already established by the language that is used, or the naming convention that is used to describe product like ours, which is conversational intelligence software. The challenge is in the space we're playing in is the market is already educated around a certain way of doing things and a certain way this technology should work. Um, and so that makes it a little bit tough. And so we have to just come in with, yes, this is good, but we almost, I'm a big fan of the challenger sale, where we then challenge, go, okay, so this is how you're used to doing things. It's great, laid the foundation, but do you have this, and this problem still? And they're like, well, yeah. And then we're like, okay, cool. So we solve for those things. And so, yes, we're occupying the same line item in your budget. Yes, you're going to use the same resources in terms of the people to manage, build, and kind of maintain the system. But we are, again, tweaking it. We're putting a different spin on the technology that you already know today. So we kind of own it. We don't try to fight it, and then we challenge them with, here's what you're experiencing already. We know the pain you have there, um, which is kind of leading to our success, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that you're positioned in a really great spot, and I understand the challenges there. But you don't have to create a new market. You're not getting people to understand what conversational intelligence is. You're just trying to change their expectation of what's possible, uh, which I think will be very sticky once you get customers and start providing value for the ones that you have, and once you continue to build out the product more, so that you're really executing on that value proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think so. I mean, and then most of our customers that we have, they are replacing the incumbent conversational intelligence software with us. So we're displacing the competition that occupies that line item today. So we feel pretty good about our strategy.
Yeah. So I wonder if I can get you to talk a little bit about what it's been like working with Biso Studio. You talked a little bit about how John was kind of crazy enough to be like, yeah, I think that's possible. But I'm sure there were lots of ups and downs in that relationship over time. But I think what we do is a little unique, and it's kind of hard to explain to people from our perspective. Maybe you can give some perspective of how do you look at Biso Studio as a partner, and where do you find value in that relationship?
John made a post on LinkedIn the other day, something to the effect of like, the excitement of working with startups, you know, and how it's just a wild ride. It's been a roller coaster, right? So I think there's been more times than John will ever tell me where he's probably wanted to strangle me or fire me as a client. Um, and I think that that's normal and it's healthy. And I felt the same way about John, probably more
Mm-hmm.
times than I'll ever care to admit. And that tension and that battling, I think, is healthy, because the end result is always better than if someone just caved in
Mm-hmm.
and kind of rolled over. And so, yeah, it's been awesome. I can honestly say Abstract would not be here today if it weren't for Biso. I think that I did not know how much of a true partner they would be. I thought they would kind of be, when I first started, I'd be like, oh, they'd be an order taker. They'd do what I tell them to do. But ultimately, the ownership that the entire team has taken around Abstrakt has turned Abstrakt into a better product. I mean, they make decisions that I'm like, oh, didn't even think about that. Like, great job. And then there's other times where I'm like, oh, why did you make that decision? And I think that's normal.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so,
Yeah, I
um,
think in many ways it's a lot like having someone on your team, except that that team is a whole nother that one what would be that one person on your team is a whole nother team of people who have
yep,
also built some other startups, built a lot of other technology, which is an interesting way to build a company for sure.
yeah. I mean, and it's like, oftentimes it's kind of a catch 22 because when you go and talk with investors, they want technical leadership in house, they want technical resources in house. But at the same time, they love the fact that I have an entire project management, QA, dev, engineering team for about what I would pay for one engineer in the United
Hmm.
States. And so it's like you kind of got to take with the good and the bad, right? And be okay with that. And especially early stage, one of the things that you're concerned about is burning capital. And working with a startup studio like Biso allows you to be more capital efficient, which helps you validate assumptions, get to product market fit way faster than I think you could if you were giving a co-founder just equity or you tried to hire those people in house.
Yeah, and not to mention how hard it is to hire people uh, right now, especially technical people. I mean, I'm
Yes.
seeing, we just came from a Nebraska Tech Collaborative thing where they're talking about trying to add all these tech jobs to Nebraska, and they're like, where are they going to come from? Every state is struggling with this. Every country is struggling with this.
Hmm.
So I think that there's going to be a lot of investors are going to have to get used to a lot of different relationships with technical talent, whether that looks like our model or the many other models that exist. Just because out of necessity, that's the only way tech companies are going to get built.
100%. I I think that's going to be true, especially with the cost of technical talent. If you can find them, great. But then let alone hiring them,
Yeah.
and being able to afford them, like it's crazy. And you think about like I'll just give you an anecdote of we're looking for a technical leader in house, and we've been looking for like 3 or 4 months now. And I was competing against Amazon that's
Hmm.
offering 4x the salary that I can provide. And I'm like, yeah, but you get to join a startup and you get this equity. And he's like, yeah, but I can buy a second and a third house with the salary that that Amazon's going to pay me. And I'm like, yeah, well, I can't argue that. So
Right.
it's I think the startup studio that offers different services at a discounted rate in exchange for equity becomes like a partner in the company. And yeah, I do think VCs need to maybe look at changing their perspective on what technical leadership looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is probably happening more than maybe you see, because there's other
Maybe, yeah.
startups, like a lot of venture capital studios are starting up their own startup studios. So it's like clearly they see a need there, and I think that like where you're at, where you're approaching seed Series A eventually, like that's kind of where it makes sense to pay someone those big dollars to be your inside technical leadership. But you got to get there first, and how are you going to get there if you don't have a technical partner to get there? So I think that's what they're seeing. They'll incubate companies inside their VC firm until they're ready for a Series A, and then they'll spin them out.
Yeah,
And that's
100%.
a model.
Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely. I think so. I think so.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
so with where you're at now, Greg, and where you're headed, is there any way that anyone that might find this, like, what are you looking for and what are you trying to do moving forward? If someone's interested in Abstrakt as a customer, how can they reach out? How can they learn more? If they're interested in being a potential investor or something, is there ways to connect with you and follow along?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, great place. Craig Reffner, on Abstract. I'm listed as an employee on Abstract's LinkedIn page. Email is greg at abstract.ai. Phone number is 530-306-4078. Call me. Um, so happy to answer and talk to anybody they want that wants to chat. I think honestly, what's been, if anybody's interested in working with Beeso, call me because I'm more than happy to share my experiences as well. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to chat abstract, happy to share my experience with Beeso. And yeah, I would just encourage anybody to give you guys a good look because, again, you guys were the only person that said, let's try it. Everybody else said no.
We're just
And maybe
crazy enough
that's,
to say yes.
I was going to say, maybe it's the combination of just good steak and corn in Omaha that kind
Yeah.
of makes you guys a little bit crazy. But
There's nothing else to do here but to take crazy bets on startups. So
yeah, and yeah. So, yeah, happy chat with anybody.
awesome. Well, thank you, Greg. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was awesome time with you, Craig.